Hey there. So there was a question on the music theory subreddit about what scales Meshuggah use. And I think that basically almost all the online discussion about Meshuggah music theory is about the rhythms. And they do a lot more interesting stuff. So I thought I'd construct this lesson to give you no context required view into Meshuggah's note choice. Frederick once said that he doesn't have any kind of formal schooling in terms of music, right? So his note choice is intuitive and by ear, but that doesn't mean that we can't find useful ways to describe it. So I'm going to start this lesson assuming you know nothing about music theory, and I'm going to take you through a few Meshuggah riffs that build on top of the same kind of ideas, and hopefully that gives you an insight into some of their writing process. So we're going to start with a thing called a tritone. So each fret on the guitar is a semitone. So if each fret is a semitone, 3 tones, right? A tritone is 6 frets. So if you start with, say, the open B flat and go up 6 frets, you have a tritone. That's an evil sound. And tritones have been like there since the very start of metal. So if you go back to Black Sabbath, there's a tritone there. So ideally, right, if we're looking at Meshuggah riffs building on top of each other and we want to talk about tritones and diminished sounds, there should be a Meshuggah riff that's just a tritone. And there is. So that's a very simple riff. It's just a root note and a tritone, 2 notes. Probably the simplest thing you could discuss in terms of note choice. And the next thing I want to look at is a thing called a diminished triad, right? Triad meaning 3 notes. So we're going to have one more note. Don't get too intimidated. So we're going to start with a root note. And the tritone, like before. But we're going to have one note in the middle this time, called the minor third, which is up 3 frets from the root note. So it's 0, 3, 6, right? So those notes are all 3 frets apart. And there's going to be a common property we're going to discuss soon, which is going to be quite interesting, called symmetry. So let's say if these diminished triads are useful, it should be easy enough to find a Meshuggah riff that's just a diminished triad. So apart from that one trick where we move the note from the 12th fret down to the open string, it's just a diminished triad, right? 3 notes, all of them are 3 frets apart. And for those of you that have been paying attention, you might have noticed that if we just went up 3 frets every time, we'd end up on 12 anyway, right? We go 0, 3, 6, 9, 12. And this is what's called diminished 7th chord, right? And you have 4 notes, all of them are 3 frets apart, or a minor third apart. And the cool thing about this is that it's always the same shape anywhere on the guitar. So like, and you'll hear that a lot in all kinds of death metal. But basically, we now have a kind of movable, evil-sounding shape, right? So, as you might have guessed, there is in fact a Meshuggah riff that is just a diminished 7th arpeggio. while, you've seen that we can create some cool sounding ideas with tritones, which are notes that are 6 frets apart, and diminished arpeggios, which are when you take notes that are 3 frets apart. And that will get you far in terms of sounding evil and like Meshuggah, which is great. I want to look at one more example. So this is Entrapment of Catch 33, and it's quite a big jump in complexity in some ways, but I think you'll find that everything it's based off has already been covered, and if you look at it carefully and take some time with it, I think you'll be able to understand where the notes are coming from. I did a much more detailed lesson on this one before, but I want to focus on the note choice this time in a different way and break it down into the concepts we've just discussed. So first of all, it's based off a descending diminished 7 arpeggio. So instead of going, we're going to go, then to spice things up, maybe what we could do is add a big jump on top of each note. So something like right, and maybe it sounds cooler if you move the last one up a fret, right? So yeah, that's cooler. And then you might add a pedal tone, so you might just hit the low F string between each group. So something like, okay, yeah, so there's a riff based off our diminished 7 arpeggio like we discussed before. And then there's a bit that goes, and that's our old friend the tritone going. So we have notes that are just 6 frets apart, packed on top of each other. So there's a few more bits to that riff, right? And there's a detailed analysis in my other video. So I just wanted to show you it's still all based off the same ideas, right? So we've got our old friend the tritone from the 1970s and Black Sabbath, right? And we've got diminished chords, right? So things where all the notes are 3 frets apart. You can throw some cool shit on top of that and spice things up, but that's enough to get you started and writing some cool Meshuggah-like riffs of your own. I'd like to continue this series and do a few more lessons. It kind of depends how much time I have to like look into stuff and break it down. But yeah, I hope you had fun.